All right, hey everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the AI panel hosted by the California Center for Ethics and Policy and the Digital Humanities Consortium. My name is Jonathan Kerrigan. I'm a philosophy major here at Cal Poly as well as a CCEP fellow. This year's fellowship focuses on the governance and ethical issues arising from AI's rapid development. So first, get through thanking some of and introducing some of our sponsors for today. So each year, CCEP organizes programming, including a student fellowship program, a spring seminar class, and our annual speaker and panel series, such as this, around a central theme of national and global interest, but those especially pertinent to California. This year's theme is artificial intelligence, in which this year's fellows will be working to produce a professional quality podcast related to specific AI-related issues of their choice. So, we are hosting some events if you're interested in making podcasts of your own. DHC is excited to be hosting 2 podcast deep dive workshops on campus tomorrow and Monday. Check out the DHC's Instagram for more about these events and other things we'll be offering over the spring and summer. So we'd also like to thank the DHC, the Digital Humanities Consortium, who offers resources for students, faculty, and staff, broader CCP and Pomona communities as well. They host expert pedagogical workshops, micro-credentialing, and showcase faculty and student-produced digital scholarships. So before we get to the introductions of our speakers and soon-to-come speaker, he's on his way. So we encourage you to sign up for our mailing list, listed right here, Instagram, mailing list, calendar. You can see it right there. So straight to it. We have our first speaker, Dr. Tiffany Tsantsoulas. She's the Director of Interdisciplinary Studies and Assistant Professor of Philosophy at Cal State Bakersfield. She teaches on social philosophy, philosophy of race, feminist philosophy. Her research is concerned with how structural oppressions and privileges are reinforced and challenged within everyday experience. With this in mind, are you interested in mint oil as a remedy for migraines? How about submitting your husband's will? Social media's AI-driven recommendation algorithms are increasingly steering users interested in wellness content towards messages that reinforce regressive gender roles and anti-feminist beliefs. Using online hashtag #TradCulture as a case study, this talk employs feminist philosophical frameworks to reveal the unexpected and growing links between extremist race and gender ideologies and mainstream wellness content. And with that, I'll kind of let you take it over.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. So I was thinking about the title for this panel, Algorithmic Identities, and it allowed me to really frame the work that I've been doing, as you just heard about, looking at gendered wellness content in social media from a feminist lens, feminist philosophical lens. And so I want to consider today how we can study the conceptual affinities, the kind of constellation of concepts that come up when we track the content that's surfacing on AI-driven recommendation systems. So think about like your TikTok For You page or something like that, right? And so we might ask, what does the For You page tell you about what it's like to be a woman today, what it's like to be an unwell woman or a woman who is well? And so the lens I'm using then is, there we go, gendered wellness content to think about this topic. So this is a broad category of content primarily aimed at girls and women, but that also takes the gendered body, gendered subjectivity as the kind of target of its interventions. So gender's always figured prominently in wellness, but now that wellness is a multi-trillion-dollar and growing industry that is largely present on social media, my research is showing, and others that I've been reading, is showing that this content is becoming more gendered than ever before, and that those gender narratives are more binary than ever before. So what is wellness? Wellness refers to a myriad of self-directed practices that are aimed at improving an already healthy body. And so the hallmark of wellness is that being well is really undefinable, and therefore it's kind of impossible to measure whether or not you've achieved it. And so wellness content is really driving at getting the individual to engage in an endless task or endless series of tasks aimed at achieving this kind of amorphous thing. And so we get these sort of vague buzzwords like mindfulness or positivity or non-toxic or optimization or something like that. So I started to become interested in this topic as a feminist philosopher when I noticed in real time that my Explore page on Instagram was suddenly suggesting or recommending what I would call explicitly anti-feminist wellness content, as well as wellness content that had political and other kinds of conspiracy theories in it. So think something like vaccine skepticism. And I noticed that that was happening as I was becoming more interested in what were, up until then, pretty mainstream ideas. Things like organic food or homesteading. You can probably think, oh, that's the one that did it, right? Started driving my feed. So I started to track this move. I started to track this move. And both by using my own research accounts on Instagram and TikTok, and also looking at what was already out there. And so some of this data exists largely in media studies, extremism studies, and a lot in the popular press. So you've probably seen some of this popping up. There's all kinds of articles now about wellness and tradwives and that kind of thing. There's a lot more data-driven analysis right now on the analog to this, or that idea of the manosphere, right? So there's a lot more out there already on how algorithmic recommender systems are driving boys and men toward red pill content, extreme misogynist content, but there's less attention on the women's side of things. So we're gonna focus on the women's side of things today. And so as a feminist philosopher, I'm particularly interested in understanding these pipelines. So how is mainstream wellness content driving toward extremist gender and race ideologies, and as well as the growing anti-feminism in these cultures. And so I want to think about how feminist philosophical frameworks can help us diagnose what's happening, but also hopefully provide some solutions or some challenges. And so I'm going to use tradwives as a kind of useful case study for this type of analysis. So there's one question I want us to keep in mind for the presentation, which is, how is recommended content reshaping our common narratives about womanhood, motherhood, and femininity? And so I want to start with the topic of recommended content. Right? So I've been talking about recommender systems. Our informational ecosystem is rapidly changing, and increasingly large part of that is the content that's surfacing with these AI recommender systems. Recommender systems refer to the complex interaction between us as content consumers and also producers. The system itself, so the platform, the algorithms that drive the recommendations, other forms of the user experience, and then, and this researcher Narayanan gave us this handy graphic, right? And then that complex interaction between those things is producing emergent effects. And so this idea that this might be reshaping our narratives about social identity, how we understand ourselves to be gendered subjects, to be raced subjects, would be one of those emergent effects. Okay. A couple things to note here. We don't know that much about how these systems work. There's some proprietary black box information there, but we know enough that we can assume that the main objective is something like driving engagement. Yeah. So whatever it's recommending to you, it's trying to get you to engage. And it's important to know that engagement is not, doesn't mean you like it. It doesn't mean that you want to see that content. It means that you're looking at it. You're watching it, you're not scrolling away. And there's been lots of studies, some done by Meta, previously Facebook, right, that shows that outrage, for example, drives engagement. So in some ways, the more out there the content is, the more engagement, because you get the people that like it that are looking at it, the people that hate it are looking at it, right? The people that are neutral but are just kind of gawking, hey, they're looking at it too. So these recommender systems, we know, are driving content that we're all looking at more and more and more hours a day, that and this kind of euphemistic phrase we have here, right? Of course, the notion of quality might not be normatively desirable. In other words, we know that this isn't somehow some kind of altruistic social good system, nor is it some kind of nefarious evil system either. It's something in the middle. Okay, so I want us to think about these emergent effects. In particular, I want us to think about the way that these recommender systems, being such a large part of our informational ecosystem, might be affecting the very way that we understand who we are, especially when we think about our social identities, because our social identities, those identities we share with other subjects, are always collectively fabricated. Right? You might have your own notion of what it means to be the gender that you are, but you don't control that completely. That didn't just come from you. It's a communal project. And so these recommender systems and the feeds they produce are now part of that project. Okay, so back to our question then, keeping this in mind, right? How is this content reshaping our narratives about womanhood, femininity, and motherhood? And so the particular lens that I took on this issue, as I said, is gendered wellness content. And so what have I found? What do we see? Well, the first major reshaping happened when there was an explosion of what I want to call, excuse me, neoliberal wellness content. And this is probably best represented by somebody like Gwyneth Paltrow and her Goop empire. This is really peaking around 2020. And we'll talk a little bit about why that peak is no longer the case. So the hallmarks of this kind of content is we get this sort of apolitical idea that what it means to be a woman is to lean in, right? You want to be a girl boss. You want to seize agency via economic power. You want to be a better consumer. You have a little bit of distrust of traditional epistemic authority, but again, that's kind of an agential thing. You want to become the epistemic authority. So we can see this idea of do your own research coming in here, but also there's a lot of guru-student relationships developing in this kind of content, right? So you're not just going to trust the establishment, but you're going to find your own authorities that you want to trust. Now, of course, there's also like an unexamined, unacknowledged investment in what might be called a very traditional notion of white femininity here, right? That we can take up white femininity as a form of social power. And reliably, that's been the case in the Western world. Okay, now feminists have been raising the alarm about this kind of content for a long time. I have some of the texts up there. All of their critiques, while amazing, have a common theme, which is that one of the big problems with this content is its allegiance to neoliberal capitalism. So we have what are structural problems, unhealthy food systems, failures in women's health, but we are coming up with individual solutions to those problems that, you just need to find the right crystals or find the right guru who can take you to the right retreat or something, instead of looking at what non-neoliberal feminists have been arguing for forever, right? What we need are community-based, grassroots, heterogeneous structural solutions to these structural problems, not individual ones. Okay, but then something happens through the pandemic, and I'm calling this the pandemic shift. So we see this shift in mainstream wellness content, and let's keep in mind, again, this isn't stuff that we are necessarily actively searching out, subscribing, liking, following. This is stuff that's coming to our eyes via these recommender feeds where we're spending most of our time now anyway. Okay, this shift happens, and we start to notice that wellness content, mainstream wellness content, takes on this more nostalgic, soft aesthetic. There's a kind of romanticized, rural vibe going on, right? We don't want to be lean-in girl bosses anymore. We're tired, right? We want to pretend to be farmers in nice dresses. It looks very nice. Those are actually two different wealthy white women pretending to be farmers. But there's a pretty uniform aesthetic going on here. Okay, so what's interesting to me though is what happens here is all of a sudden we see an intensification of binary gender narratives, binary gendered aesthetics. There's a kind of emphasized femininity happening here. We have bows and flowy dresses, and there's a if Goop was a little bit sex positive in a, I don't even want to say queer way, but in a sort of not strictly cis heteronormative way, cis heteronormativity is right back in this version of wellness content. And then politically and epistemically, we also see a kind of intensification. So the anti-establishment sentiments are stronger. In fact, kind of excitingly, there's some anti-capitalism going on here, but it's not a sustained critique by any means or a thought-out critique by any means. And there's a kind of overt distrust of epistemic authorities happening. So we're mad at the CDC, we're mad at the FDA, right? That's becoming more and more present in this kind of content. And so one way to frame this shift is to say that gendered wellness culture is taking part in this larger phenomenon that Kathleen Bellow named the crunchy to alt-right pipeline. And so you might think of figures like RFK Jr., the Make America Healthy Again movement, and that's, again, really ramping up through the pandemic. It's always there, but becoming more and more mainstream and now, holding federal office. There's a couple things I want to note here. The first is just that AI-driven recommender systems love this stuff. It's great because it drives engagement. I'm sure some of us engage with it. I engage with this content, right? It's really nice to look at. Sometimes I have to go like, I don't like the gender norms you're kind of pushing there, but man, that's pretty, right? But it's also gets a little bit edgy, and so that's driving engagement too. The second thing to note is the intensification of binary gender narratives in this shift, right? As I mentioned, there's this idea that we're going to capitalize on the social power afforded by normative femininity. That this is a kind of reaction to the way that women are burning out in our late-stage neoliberal capitalism. And so the third thing I want to note is that when we pay attention to how gender operates in this shift in the content we see popping up on our recommender feeds, it really highlights something that scholars who study extremism have been saying lately, which is that more and more we see girls and women engaging in extremist communities online. And so, like I said, we're paying a lot of attention to the pipeline in terms of how young boys and men are being pushed into those communities. I think wellness is a pipeline for how young girls and women are being pushed into those communities too. Okay. Best example of that, then, are our trad wives. Let's meet the trad wives, right? In the perfect sense, they're showing how the effects of this kind of emergent ecosystem. So these affinities I've been tracking between gendered wellness content, regressive, or increasingly regressive gender, and race norms becomes much clearer and much more worrisome when we consider the rise of tradwife content. And the latest number I could find was from September 2023. But by September 2023, the hashtag tradwife had been viewed 250 million times on TikTok. We can imagine it's much, much more than that at this point. So this isn't fringe whatsoever. Tradwife content is in many ways a continuation of the mainstream wellness project aimed at women, right? That is, it's purporting to provide women with solutions to the ills of modernity. So if we look across all this content, there's one thing we can all agree on. It's like women are not well. We're struggling. Okay, but how does the tradwife say that we should achieve wellness in this very strictly gendered framework? Well, the tradwife tells her audience that achieving wellness requires committing to kind of disciplinary practices. Same thing with mainstream wellness content. It's always about, these are my 10 habits for having an effective day or something. That doesn't go away. But those disciplinary practices now are aimed at developing a kind of submissive feminine subjectivity. Right? So we are proudly anti-feminist, we're proudly pro-patriarchy, we're willfully submitting to male authority. In fact, women are unwell because of sort of misguided attempts. They were swayed by those feminists, right? Those lean-in feminists to try to become men. And so we need to return to this traditional, naturalized, universal notion of femininity in order to be well. We see an old idea come back again, which is this notion that female subjectivity is about suffering, in the sense that suffering and sacrifice. So what should you do with your agency as a woman? You should use it to sacrifice the self, right? You sacrifice primarily to your husband, to your children, but also to the community, to your race, to the nation, and nationalism definitely comes in here too. In fact, there's this trend of like male trad husbands bragging on social media about their wives giving birth without medication or something, right? It's a very visceral indication that suffering, the woman suffering is the way that she's sort of showing her optimized femininity and her ability to be well. Aesthetically, we see the same trend from the post-pandemic shift, right? Dreamy escapism, a sort of nostalgic domesticity. But this time, the aesthetic as well as the discursive connections to white nationalism, Christian nationalism, and neo-fascism are much more apparent. So, in fact, so apparent that we have researchers who work on extremism that are studying trad wives now. This might be a little bit small, but they've kind of mapped out the landscape of trad wives. And so what we're seeing here in real time is something about, or in a visual sense, are those emergent effects. So what happens when we're interacting with these recommender systems that are surfacing this content to more and more eyeballs? Well, there's a clear pipeline happening between folks on this side that are maybe into less extreme political, ethical, and social positions toward folks on the other side that are very explicitly, say, pro-white, pro-Christian, Christian nationalist, and so on. Okay, so now that I've given you all of that, back to our question, right? How are recommender systems, or how's the content, I'm trying to remember what I said. How is recommended content reshaping our common narratives about womanhood, femininity, and motherhood? I want to leave you with some thoughts. It could seem really scary. I could have told you a different story, and I think that's important too. So the first thing I want us to notice is that our identities are contested, and they always have been, right? Social philosophers are always telling us, have been telling us for a long time, that our sense of self, our subjectivity is not something that we just create, but is in fact developed through a kind of contestation with other agents, with cultural norms, with structures, and we can't deny that AI recommender systems in our social feeds are now part of that. They're part of that contestation. All of these cultures that I mentioned, this anti-feminist, sometimes pro-white supremacist narratives also come with all kinds of counter narratives too. So there's parody accounts that are mocking trad wives. There's trad wives accounts that are very clearly sort of like pornographic fetish material. It really runs the gamut. And I think that tells us something. It tells us something really interesting about what it means to have a social identity. And really for the first time, we're seeing it visibly in front of us, all of these contradictions and contestations. So there's that. The other thing I want to leave us with is that I think feminist philosophy can really intervene here in an interesting way. So the work that I'm going to do going forward, from my tradition, I work in feminist phenomenology and existentialism, is to think about how ideas way back from 1949 from Beauvoir, for example, are relevant now, that we can think about the connections between mainstream, sometimes even late feminist wellness content and this trad wife anti-feminist content. There's connections there. For example, seeing the idea of being a woman as a disciplinary product, right? That is, that regardless of whether you think it's empowering or you're intentionally trying to disempower yourself, that womanhood is something that requires this kind of constant disciplinary intervention. Finally, lest we think that this kind of content exists in a cultural, social sphere that doesn't touch on policy or public life, unfortunately not the case. Right? So we can see how some of the emergent effects we want to be concerned with are how are these recommender systems and the content that they're, again, putting on more and more eyeballs is shaping and reshaping our beliefs, affecting our democracy and our public policy. And so I've given you one example up there. This is from House resolution. From the current Congress, came from a member from Arizona. It hasn't been taken up by the House, but it's just been introduced. But it's a resolution on women's health care. And I highlighted some pieces there for you because really interestingly, wow, I think I know what's on his Instagram feed, right? We can see how this language is coming right into our public policy, right? That is that we need to have healthcare for women that emphasizes wellness, including spiritual wellness, and then that last part, right? That healthcare for women should also address the needs of men, families, and the communities. It's taken right out of the Tradwife playbook. Okay. I will stop there. I'm excited to talk more with you all. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Rayheem Eskridge, a CPP librarian from the College of Environmental Design, who will discuss AI ethics from the standpoint of power and privilege and the harms caused by the perceptions of AI neutrality. His talk, Navigating Away from Algorithmic Injustice. AI systems are reshaping how we access and understand information, but at what ethical cost? This talk examines how AI ethics with racism, intellectual property theft, and information literacy development. From the extraction of marginalized voices, creative work, to the biases encoded into algorithmic systems, we'll explore how AI reinforces existing inequities while complicitly the pursuit of credible, ethical information, grounded in critical information literacy. This talk invites reflection on how educators, creators, and users can navigate AI's challenges while fostering agency and accountability in digital spaces.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Rayheem Eskridge, and I am, thank you for that introduction. I am one of the librarians here at Cal Poly Pomona. And one of the things that I spend a lot of time doing is looking at how students interact with information, how students interact with technology and information, and how students interact with AI and information. And so I thought that I would just take a second to talk about what AI ethics is, because we have not come to a consensus of what AI ethics is and what that means and what that looks like in our practices, in our beliefs, in our behaviors. So I wanted to give kind of three different, they're related, but three different kind of entities definition of AI ethics. So we'll start with IBM. IBM is a major technology industry, and we see that they talk about AI ethics as a multidisciplinary field that studies how to optimize the beneficial impact of artificial intelligence while reducing risks and adverse outcomes. And that sounds nice. That sounds cool, right? I don't think that just reading that sounds like a bad thing. Let's look at Wikipedia. Wikipedia, I wanted this one specifically because Wikipedia comes to us from the community. Anyone can add to it. That also adds, an additional red flag of consideration, but it's generally what we can think of as what the community at large, whatever that looks like, thinks about what this should look like. So it looks like collectively Wikipedia has decided that AI ethics, the ethics of artificial intelligence covers a broad range of topics within the field that are considered to have particular ethical stakes. This includes algorithmic biases, fairness, automated decision-making, accountability, privacy, and regulation. To be fair to IBM, they do discuss this a little bit more. These are just little snippets, of course, and theirs is very similar as you read on the IBM website. Microsoft gives us one where they don't actually refer to AI ethics as AI ethics. They refer to it as responsible artificial intelligence as their approach, specifically with their Azure product. And that is an approach to developing, assessing, assessing and deploying AI systems in a safe, trustworthy, and ethical way. It's a framework for building AI systems according to 6 principles, and we'll notice how familiar those are: fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability. So thank you for reading that along with me. I know it's up there, but I wanted to take a second to do that because what we don't see is what this looks like in practice, right? So Dr. Sophia Noble brought us about a decade ago The Algorithms of Oppression, a book where she discusses her research looking into how algorithmic systems display or have displayed or have resulted in what can be viewed as racist outcomes, such as typing into Google woman and you get a certain look, typically Caucasian, and typing in black woman and the first hits were pornographic, right? So we see that even what should be objective, right? Objective would just be black woman, and you would typically imagine one would get an image of a cis black woman. That comes coded with all of these intricacies that one would not originally anticipate to be there, but the result is that. And how is the result that? AI is not magic. AI is not mysterious in that way. AI is a aggregation, right? It's a combination. It's not neutral. AI is a reflection of human biases. It is a compilation either by large language models or other large data grabs of information that humans have created now. We'll discuss what that looks like for us a little bit later on, now that we have more advanced AI systems. But originally, the idea is this is what humans have created, but it comes coded with all of the biases that we have put there, particularly in the Western countries, particularly the United States. We know that our data sets are often biased towards Western views, particularly those in the United States, English-speaking countries, and so on. So AI, like people, tends to trend towards racism until it's told not to. So the damage has already been done once we've told it not to. So how do we confront that? Here are 2 videos that I won't play right now because we will be here forever. But we have Sophia Noble talking about the experience of doing this research. And then we have Joy Buolamwunmi. I'm sorry, she's not here, so I apologize to her from a distance, talking about the experience of not being seen by AI. What does that mean, right? So we have one instance where a black woman is seen as a sex object, and another instance, what Joy talks about, AI systems not being able to recognize black faces, being rendered invisible by AI systems. So 2 extremes, one of hypersexual hypervisibility, the other of absolute invisibility. How does that impact one? How does that impact one experience, right? How does that impact how one trusts or distrusts AI systems, right? Now, I want to talk about building these systems for just a moment because, as I mentioned, they're not neutral. They're not neutral. When we train AI, as you can see here, AI learns, quote unquote, from all corners of the internet. There are various different AI products and AI systems, so we're taking a very broad brush here, but AI is able to learn anything from just about anywhere. Wherever it can get the information, it'll do so. And there's very limited legislation keeping it from doing so. So AI in that way is a reflection of the norms, values, and biases that have been fed into it, that have been created by all of us. And those things are always there. They're always a part of the part of the mix. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not to say, anyone's particularly evil for having a bias. We all have biases and they all manifest in different ways. But collectively, once all of those are put together into the soup that AI is feeding from, we start to see patterns emerge. And so the AI has not only, now that we've gotten to this stage in generative AI, is not only learning from these large data sets that have all these biases in them, they're now starting to learn from each other. AI systems are starting to learn from each other. I didn't put up here the dark forest theory. We don't have time to go into that. But the idea being that as AI becomes increasingly more common, and as AI products and their output becomes more and more of what's available on the internet, we start to see human output less and less. So it starts to learn from itself more and more. So just like making a fax of a fax of a fax, or a copy of a copy of a copy, the flaws end up, oh, I see me, I hear me. That's so cool. The flaws end up becoming magnified. They end up becoming heightened. They end up repeating one another in a way that becomes counterproductive. Well, it's been counterproductive from the start, but it's increasingly counterproductive because now how do we undo it? Right. So when we use AI, part of the problem with this, so I wanted to go into the training element, because part of the problem is, I've said all this, it's not gonna stop us from using AI. We're still gonna do it. I don't imagine anyone is going to leave this room being like, I'm swearing off of all AI right now, right? So we can talk about AI ethics until we're blue in the face, but as the products become more ubiquitous, as they become more ingrained in our everyday experience to the point of invisibility, we have to contend with what it means to use it. And these need to be thoughts that we have actively so that we can contend with what we will do next. So it's becoming increasingly difficult to spot fake images, to spot faked information, hallucinations, what they're called when AI creates fake information out of nowhere. It's becoming increasingly difficult to spot that. It's increasingly difficult to know where AI is getting the information it's getting. Again, these are large data sets, or it's combing the internet for whatever it is to address your information need. Some things like ChatGPT will put limited citations or links where it got things like the Google AI feature that tells people to, put glue on their cheese pizza. They might give you a citation of where they got the information from, but it doesn't tell the whole story. The information is increasingly difficult to evaluate. In some instances, we think that the AI knows more than we do, and that it's better at what it does than we are at those things. And so this creates for us a false notion that I don't think we know we need to challenge, and I don't think we know how. So I want to introduce a method that I work with my students. This method comes to us from Mike Caulfield out of the University of Washington, and it's called the SIFT method. This is increasingly important because while AI ethics are important to me, and while I think it's important that we find more robust ways to interact with the world than to rely on AI to do things, I don't get to tell y'all what to do. So the one thing I can do is give you a tool to help you think about the information that you're coming across, especially information created by AI, so that you can make the best decisions for you in that moment. So we'll start with the first letter of this acronym, the SIFT method. The first letter is S, and that's for stop right there. Don't do anything, right? You've come across information, don't do anything with it. Don't share it, right? Don't try to avoid having a strong emotional reaction to it. I think we've all been on TikTok or Facebook or any social media and seen someone post something, and we're immediately upset about it. And then we post it to the group chat and we start, going in on this person, knowing that we haven't even read the actual article or seen the video, right? We're reacting to the headline. So this asks us to stop. Don't engage, just sit with it for a second, because our very next step is going to be to investigate the source. Where did this come from, right? I'm looking at this video, or I'm looking at this article, or I'm looking at this image. I have an emotional reaction, but I don't even know who made it. I don't even know where it came from. That's a problem. That's a problem, right? Once I do know who it came from, what's their reputation? Are they known for putting out inflammatory information? Are they known for putting out fake information or unverified information? Who are these people? What are their credentials? right? I got to investigate the source. Who is this organization, right? I have to look into that. Our very next step after that, I need to find better coverage. Somebody put this information out. They're sharing this information. No one shares information for no reason. No one puts the time into creating something for nothing, right? We all have better things to do, I would imagine, right? So our next step there is to, beyond questioning why this exists, does it exist in a better place than where I found it, right? If someone's sharing, let's say, a video on TikTok, I'm picking on TikTok today. If someone shares a video on TikTok, let's say it's a video of some, I don't know, politician saying something. We'll try not to get political. Some politician saying something. Is there a better place that I can access this video to see what was said, right? I'm seeing a clip. I have an emotion based on this clip. I don't even know what the person said in full. I don't even know if this video is real, right? Deepfakes, AI is very, very good and getting better every day at deepfakes. I don't know if you all have seen the videos of our president saying things that he did not say, although he says a lot that we need to be concerned about. I need to look at the video where it's supposed to be, where it lives, at a more official source. Can I go to, let's say, whitehouse.gov, right? If this is an academic article, so many students will type into Google, whatever it is that they want to find, and they find that article on the first page. They never look at the second. Find that article on the first page. They're like, aha, this is the one. This is the research right here. They click that PDF. Where'd that PDF come from? I don't know. Did they look at the journal, right? Did they look at the top of it and see, little journal name, and go to the journal's website and check to see if that article is there, check to see if there's maybe a retraction to that article? No, they just kind of took it, right? This isn't to shame students. I mean, this is just, if you don't know better, you don't do better, right? So this will ask us to make that a part of our behavioral patterns. Let me find where this thing exists in the best place that it could possibly exist. Rather than a floating PDF online, let me go to the journal and let me go see if it exists there. Let me go see if it says the same thing there that it says right here, right? Instead of this TikTok video, let me go look at where this clip might have came from. Let me see it in its full context. That's us bleeding over into our T, which is to trace back to the original. Because I don't only want to go back to the source, right? I don't only want to go back to where this thing exists. I want to know why it's there. What is the context that it exists there in, right? A deep fake, I mentioned, for example, a deep fake of our president saying things that he did not say, right? Why did somebody make this? Did they make it to be inflammatory, or did they make it to show how good AI is at creating deep fakes? Same product, different reasons for existing. That's different reasons why I would interact with that information, right? So I'll go over that again. Our first step is to stop. Don't do anything with it. Sit for a second. Don't share it. Don't get angry. Don't get excited. Just sit. Our next step, we're going to go back and investigate the source, the person, the organization. Why did they post this? Why did they create this? Right? We're going to find better coverage. If I can get this information somewhere else, should I get that information there instead? Right? If someone has citations in their article or in their video or in their whatever, if they're linking out, maybe I should go look at some of those to make sure that they say what the person says they said, right? Find better coverage. Then I'm going to trace back to the original. I might need to do a reverse image search. That might be necessary. If this image looks like it's old and legitimate, but there's no record of it prior to 2 days ago, it's probably not a real image, right? We have to look beyond, the weird spider fingers that AI used to put out, and look into it deeper. I have to see if there's a record. In art, they would call it provenance, but we aren't so lucky in the wild, wild west of the internet. I have to look to see if there's a deeper record of this existing. I have to look to see if it's been altered in any way. I have to look to see if the original context has been changed. We all have heard of misinformation, right, or disinformation. But I need to be concerned about malinformation. I should have made a slide about that. I need to be concerned about malinformation, taking information that's true in a context, removing it from that context for nefarious purposes, for the purposes of deception, right, or to cause harm, right? These things are important. And when we rely on AI, right, to be our arbiter of truth or to be the resource that we use to get us the information, and we have no tools in our toolbox to be able to evaluate that information, then those questions of those AI ethics become even more apparent. They become even more important. How can I be effectively concerned about the erasure of Black women in AI, so much to the point that it can't even recognize Black faces, or to the point that it's hypersexualizing Black women, or to the point that it's hyper criminalizing Black men, right? How can I be concerned about those things, know that they're on the table, and then not have any tools to question the output of these things when I encounter that information? Even if I don't want to let go of AI altogether, which is impossible in the year of our Lord 2024, 5. I don't even know when it is, 2025. Even though that's impossible, right? And even though I might not be at a stage where I can reasonably contend with the deep ethical questions that come with the large-scale theft of intellectual property to create various AI properties or projects or products, even if I'm not there, which is a great place to be, but even if you're not there, the least we can do is be critical of the information that it puts out. And this is one tool that will allow you to do so. So I want to say thank you so much for letting me yap at you for a little bit. I'm happy to answer any questions and continue this conversation deeper. As a student of critical information literacy, that looks at the intersections of power and information, I know that this conversation never ends. My bias, I'll be open about. I am deeply anti-technology. I love pen and paper, and I think we should go back to it. So that's my bias out there. But knowing that we live in the world that we live in, being realistic, I know that these conversations require further investigation, and I'm happy to be a part of that conversation with you. So thank you.
Thank you very much for those wonderful presentations. Before we get into the Q&A, we do encourage everybody here to fill out a quick survey at the end. You'll get some free swag. Stay till the very end. Get some cool stuff. I did have some personal questions. So Rayheem, I guess we'll start with my question for you. You had spoken on AIs generating racist content until told otherwise. In my AI ethics class, we also discussed that AI can derive racist generalizations even when the parameters are like protected. You know, as it's been developed on like a set of historical context, a data set. So given this, how can we create a future forward data set if that would require a historical data set yet to exist? Or is this just kind of an inherent problem and we just need to focus on like misinformation mitigation, like hemorrhaging the bleeding as you discussed through your SIFT method?
Thank you. That's a fantastic question. And I wish I had an answer that would be a panacea to the problem. I don't work with AI on the technical side. I work on the other side, which is how we deal with it. So when it comes to how it might be coded or how the metadata might exist in a way that would help circumvent those sorts of issues, I can't speak with intelligence. But what I will say as far as how I think we might be able to approach it, I think we might be able to approach it by combining two different things. As we make the products available, we also come with the realization, and this will not be a great way to get investors, but we come with the realization that our product has an inherent flaw in it because our data sets have an inherent flaw because the people that created it came with a bias. Their product or the output, our collective output, came with a series of biases. So the work that it creates may reflect those things. And so combined with the tool, I would also combine with it things like this, ways that we can investigate and make sure that we are looking deeper into the output of AI. As it stands now, ChatGPT, if you type something in there and it's wrong, you won't know it's wrong unless you know it's wrong. And when you tell it it's wrong, it says, you were right. This thing is, it doesn't know that, right? It's not a person, right? And it's not necessarily even remembering why it was wrong, right? So I don't know what the technical solution to that is. What I think is a measure to meet that issue is on the human side of things. We, I think, are more malleable than the machine is how I would answer that question.
Thank you very much for that. That was a great answer to the question. I do have a question for you, and then I believe you have questions as well, and then we're going to open up to the audience. What I was really interested in when you had brought up was saying that outrage drives engagement. So I had written down here, do we need to change the parameters of the algorithm such that inflammatory ideas don't fester into larger scale injustice? Or is it just systemic to the individual such that it seems to me it's like driven by capitalist drive and this derived sense of auto-exploitation? And I know you talked about feminist phenomenology in kind of regards to this, and I was really interested in what you had to say about that.
It's another good and complicated question. So I think the answer is yes to both of those things. However, it's not so easy. So a little while back, Facebook, in a different timeline, wanted to see if they could tweak their parameters so that the content that was surfacing was more socially responsible. We don't know exactly what they meant by social responsibility, but that's the term they used. So they did it, and in the test case that they did, what they found was that people stopped using Facebook as much. And so then they dialed it back. So I think it's important for us to understand that it's not, and look, I could tell that story and we could say, oh my gosh, Meta, that's horrible. You guys are terrible. And maybe they are. Don't arrest me. But at the same time, we have to understand what social media is for. And I think that's something we're really struggling with. I don't think it's wrong for a platform to say, we have less users because of this tweak we made, so we're going to dial back the tweak. Sure. We're in trouble when we're trying to understand. It's like a classic problem of structural oppression, actually, right? There is no bad agent. There's not a tyrant we need to overthrow necessarily. There's not this one thing. Iris Marion Young, feminist phenomenologist, tells us this, right? Bad things are happening when everybody's just doing normal, everyday stuff. Yikes, what do? Well, it takes a large-scale structural shift. And it also means that, yeah, we care about the epistemic side of things. And I think there's a lot of regulation, or there's been a lot of attempts to regulate that, disinformation, misinformation. How can we be better information consumers? What I'm really concerned with, and I think there needs to be more attention on, though, is the social side of this. When you're on social media, you're not necessarily in the mindset that you're thinking, I'm looking for good information. Right? I'm looking for good information, so I know I should be discerning, and maybe I need tools to help me be more discerning, sure. But when you're on social media, you're trying to distract yourself, enjoy yourself, stave off boredom, stave off existential dread, whatever it is, right? So it's harder to tune into that side and think, how can I be a better epistemic agent right now? How can I be more discerning? So I think the problem is fundamentally social as well. Fundamentally social. I don't have a clear solution to that other than we need to be more aware of it.
Awesome, thank you.
I have a question for Dr. Tiffany. So when you were talking about the hashtag #TradWives, one of the things you made a connection to is the manosphere. And my question is because when you're talking about the trad wives, one thing you emphasize is how white it is, and there is a lot of racism in the manosphere, but it also is very multicultural. Like, there is a black manosphere, there is an Asian manosphere, there is a white manosphere. Does that exist in that trad community, or has it kind of blocked out everything except for that white ideal?
Yeah. Okay. Well, also that's a really complicated question. It's hard to answer. I mean, in one sense, we could say, hey, well, yeah, misogyny is really inclusive in the sense that it does kind of move. It moves across racial bounds for sure. But I think the answer, and yes, there are tradwife communities, especially ones that are very closely tied to religious communities that are just like our religious communities can be really racially segregated here. We can see the same thing. But I think there's a difference between whiteness as a phenotypical characteristic or something that an individual person has, and whiteness as an ideology. And when we think about whiteness as an ideology, as it's tied to things like binary gender through colonialism, by the way, right? That ideology can be present in what are non-white communities when we look at phenotype. And we can see that in things like colorism, for example, or preference for what might be seen as Eurocentric features. But even in the notion of what it means to say, like, be a proper woman or be an alpha man in these communities, there's a sense in which we're still upholding what Bell Hooks would call white cis heteropatriarchy. I'll have to stop there to try to keep it short. But yeah, there's a much longer answer too. Yeah.
So I'll be opening questions to the audience just because of time.
Thank you guys for being here. For Rayheem, why do you believe that universities, institutions like CPP are so anti-AI right now? Like, day one of classes, when we're all in our class going over the syllabus, every professor, don't you dare use AI. Like, check this box saying you didn't use it when you turn in your assignment. It's really like that right now. When in reality, like you said, AI is here and it's not going anywhere. And I'm sure everybody here has used it, myself included, to help with assignments and whatnot. So why is colleges and school institutions so anti right now? And do you foresee it becoming a part of mandatory curriculum, even at elementary level and stuff like that?
Fantastic question. Truly fantastic question. So I will also try to keep this brief, even though the answer is very long. A few things. The AI that we're talking about, for example, autocorrect on your phone is AI. The AI that we're talking about, things like ChatGPT and other things like that, have only existed for about 3 or 4 years. And in that time, their use has exploded, right? They're everywhere, right? We now have a contract in the CSU for the next year and a half or so that all of you will have access to ChatGPT. You all have an account, right? As of 2 weeks from now, you'll be able to access it. I got it now. I used ChatGPT, my own account, to write the abstract, right? For this, write the topic description, right? I know how to write one. This is not my first panel. I've done it. So I told it what I was talking about, and I let it do that. And I went through it and evaluated what it came up with and, changed what I wanted to change. Fundamentally, I know how to write an abstract, right? I had to learn how to write an abstract, right? The problem for, I think, many professors, and I teach here as well, and I have the same policy in my class, please do not use it unless, right? There's always a unless, right? Is because first and foremost, I think there's a misunderstanding or a disconnect between what faculty see as the role of the students, what students see as the role of the students, and what administration see as the role of the students and the university. I do not see this place as a job training facility. I see this place as as one of the few places on earth where your only role here is to learn, fundamentally to acquire skills and knowledge, right? So when you come into my classroom, my expectation is that you are here to learn. And so if you are using ChatGPT, let's say, to write an essay for you, you are taking away that opportunity to acquire that skill. Now, you may be able to go through it and say, I've changed this, 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 and this, and this about it. So that was me, writing the paper. I would disagree because my experience as a professor has shown me, and working with students has shown me, that when students are asked to write that paper without the chat GPT or whatever, the output looks very, very different because the fundamental skill has not been acquired. So if you have the skill, if you have it, I have no problem with you using it. I have no problem with it being used for brainstorming. I have no problem with it being used maybe for an outline. That's about as far as I would comfortably go at this stage of a student's experience. And even an outline, that would be a senior using it as an outline. Anything else, I think you still need to build the skills so that you can then do this sort of evaluation stuff and then be able to use it. I gave this example, and I'm going to stop talking now. I gave this example in a class just before this one. I think AI is a tool, just like any tool. I think it should be used. I would never, ever give a jackhammer to a child. It would be irresponsible. They don't know how to use it, and it's too much. It's not appropriate for their use. At this stage in the game for many students, I don't think ChatGPT is an appropriate tool for the use that it will be used for. That's my answer.
So I'm a psychology major, and I have a question for Dr. Tiffany. So I've heard about and know of people in my life personally that are stopping therapy in the traditional sense and using ChatGPT as a therapist. And I'm wondering, how do you think that that is going to negatively or positively affect the reinforcement of like these racial, gender, and power structures that you were talking about AI reinforcing?
Ooh, I have lots of thoughts about that. I think that's a really good question. And I think questions like that are going to come up more and more because, again, it's not just about AI as a research tool or as a writing tool, but also how AI is becoming integrated into our social fabric, right? It's providing care or justice, which is one we should be very scared of, and in this case, right, counseling or something. I think it's important to say that it's not necessarily going to only have negative effects, right? I mean, there's a mental health supply issue here in this country completely. So in that circumstance, in some sense, adding more access is good, sure. However, we do want to be mindful about the need for guardrails. So expertise, credentialing, those things are guardrails. And I know that we're struggling right now with that. We have a lot of anti-establishment sentiment. Look, I have anti-establishment sentiment. I'm about it. But not all anti-establishment sentiment is equal. Counselors are trained in a particular way. It's flawed, but they're trained to do things like overcome their own biases. We can't reasonably anticipate that ChatGPT would in any way be able to replicate that. So I think at this point, it's the same. It's the wrong tool for the wrong task. Accessibility, great. Cost-effective, awesome. I think there's a better solution, which is let's make mental health care more accessible.
Before we take the next question, make sure to fill out the survey so Alex Madva can give you his swag that he's trying to get rid of.
Thank you. This question could be for anyone, but it's just kind of a follow-up to the first question. So I'm a public high school teacher, and I was just thinking when y'all were talking that there was this like phrase going around like, oh, do math because you're not always going to have a calculator on you, but then students are like, oh, well, now we do. So my thought is kind of playing devil's advocate. What if a student says to me, well, I can literally, if ChatGPT can write everything for me, and it's always in my pocket. Why do I need to learn to write?
We both want to answer. Yeah, I'll put my professor hat on for a second. Okay. Yeah, this is my response always. I'm like, why do you want to prove that you're useless? Right? Why do you want to say, hey, everything I can output, this machine can do, actually better than me because I rely on it? Great. Why on earth would I ever hire you to do anything? Right? You're literally proving the fact that your brain is obsolete. You're like, you don't need my human input whatsoever. Stop doing that. Stop doing that. Capitalism loves that. It's like, great. Guess what? The AI doesn't need benefits. It doesn't need time off. No, you should be working to show, hey, these tools are great, but they're only great because my brilliant mind is telling it what to do. That's what you should be working to prove. Stop proving that you can't write as good as a free tool on the internet. It's terrifying to me.
Equally terrifying. Yes. Excellent answer. I want to follow that up with, I think, a sentiment that I expressed earlier. It's not always right. It's not always good. It's not a person. It's not intelligent. It doesn't have the capacity for intelligence. It is a machine that recognizes patterns and puts things together in a way that it thinks best fits that pattern with whatever level of competence. There it is. It's in the word, right? Artificial. It's not always right. Let me give an example. I love D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. Big fan. I wanted to test AI's capacity to be an assistant in the game. And then I said, you know what? Let me have it be the DM. Let me have it run the game for me, right? And I let it do that. And things that would be simple for you and I, such as keeping track of, let's say, our hit points, our health, right? Our health, it cannot do, right? It will not do it. It cannot keep track of multiple people's data across a campaign. It can't do it past 2 or 3 rounds, not effectively. And it will hallucinate. It will give fake information with total confidence. And then I have to go in and say, I don't think that's right. And it would be like, oh, yeah, you're right. Well, I know I'm right because I'm keeping track. So if I wasn't doing the work of keeping track, then it would be completely wrong, right? So fundamentally, it goes back for me, if you know how to do a thing and you can spot when it's wrong, then great. Feel free to use it. If you know math confidently, and I'm not talking addition, subtraction, basic stuff, if you know advanced math well enough to have it do it for you and you can spot when it's gotten something wrong, great. Most people don't have that. That's I think, my problem. So great question. And I love the devil's advocate because folks do say that. Why do I need to know how to write? Well, because writing is essential. That's how we communicate. And if you can't communicate well, and if you don't know what good writing looks like, then the 8th grade output of writing that ChatGPT produces looks like scholarship. It is not.
Another thing that we talked about in my class is the fact that people will be offended if they found out that all of the personal letters and emails that you were writing were actually not from you, but from a ChatGPT or something like that, right? So imagine you think you have a friendship with someone, but you found out that like nothing was actually written by the person. So this is, like depending on what you think about personal relationships, that might not be so good. So you want to be able to do that yourself.
Yeah, maybe I'll add to that too. I think, we think about knowledge sometimes without considering the role that trust plays in knowledge production. And again, this is something we get from feminist epistemologists like Lorraine Code, for example. Trust is so integral to knowledge production. And trust is also integral to our relationships, right? Which is what made me think of it. But for your students, I say this to my students sometimes too. I love my students. No, it's not hostile, but just let's work through. Would you trust ChatGPT to grade your work, right? Or do you want my mind doing it? And overwhelmingly, they're like, no, 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 I don't want you to use ChatGPT to grade my work. Why? Right? And they're not concerned about professional ethics because they don't trust it. They don't trust that it's going to be fair. They don't trust that it will understand what they're saying in the way that I will. Yeah, exactly. We want to be really cautious about how much we're giving up to these technologies. And I'm not an anti-tech person at all. I think AI can be fantastic. I think it has a lot of problems, but I was thinking about the title of your presentation, AI neutrality, right? Yes, but yeah, I think that we need to let go of that ideology too. We need to stop assuming that AI is in any way neutral or in any way that it could even somehow fit into these complex relational networks that we've developed that are based on things like trust, mutual understanding. Maybe it'll get there one day, but it's not there yet. And so we need to, just like you would protect yourself from saying too much at a party with a bunch of people you don't know, right? Because you're like, I don't know what they're going to do with that information. They're going to turn around tomorrow and say, like, so-and-so was super wasted and she said some crazy stuff, right? Because you don't trust them, but you can open your mouth in front of people you trust. Similarly, think about the trust you might have with these tools or the lack of that trust. I think it really matters.
I want to invite everyone to say thank you to our great speakers today. And I guess we're all free to go then.